Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach owners to build the agency of their dreams. Today, I'm really thrilled to be joined by Jonathan Baker. He heads up the M&A practice at Punctuation. Punctuation is a small advisory practice working exclusively with small to mid-sized independent marketing services, founded by industry veteran David C. Baker. Punctuation helps firms with positioning, lead generation, benchmarking, valuation, and succession planning. Jonathan has worked on dozens of deals, both inside and outside the industry, and brings a unique perspective as a fellow owner who has gone through the process himself. Thanks for joining me, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure is mine. I'm thrilled to kind of dig into this just as an overall topic, but give, kind of your backstory, how you ended up, working with Punctuation and what your story is with the agency space.
Yeah, sure. So my background is actually in craft beer. So for 10 years, I started and ran a craft brewery based here in Atlanta. We went through the M&A process as founders, and I became enamored with it at that point. We actually got left at the altar, which I think further solidified at least my interest in M&A. I think going in, I just did not realize how emotional, political, qualitative, I guess, that it was. And I joined Punctuation 4 years ago to help build out this M&A practice. We've been doing M&A for a while, but to really put some process behind it. So we do about 30 to 40 valuations a year. We do 10 to 20 transactions a year, all in, small to medium-sized marketing services firms.
Are you also on the matchmaking? If I came to you and said, I want to grow, I want to acquire, and you guys would vet and find the matches as well?
Yes, we do that as well.
Yeah, awesome. Talk about. So it's interesting. You were left at the altar with your brewer, your microbrewery. What are some of the things that cause deals to fail?
Any number of things, but leadership changes at the top. COVID. Hopefully that one won't happen.
Well, that's
again.
A blanket statement. COVID causes everything to fail.
Yeah. Failure is really one side backing out, right? And it only takes one side to back out. And so, yes, that could be the buyer, but oftentimes it's the seller who realizes, we've had deals fail because the seller's having a much better year than anticipated and wouldn't be getting credit for that in a deal. Or the seller doesn't have faith that the buyer is going to be able to, pay out some of those earnouts later on. Or there's some questions around cultural fit that come up later in the process. Maybe the buyer tries to renegotiate at the last minute. So there's a multitude of reasons that deals can fall through.
Yeah, interesting. How is it working with your dad, like as a father-son team?
Yeah, well, he might be listening to this, so it's amazing. But on the low, no, it's actually really fun. It's special to be able to, I think, see your father in a completely different arena. And, he's a really sharp guy. But I think we complement each other well. And it's been a fun process to learn from him and also to help bring some of my expertise to the business.
Yeah, I think you guys make, what little I know of each of you, I think you guys make a great complement, a great team. Certainly the content that you all put out and the work that you do is groundbreaking in the industry. I had Emily Ruth Cohen and her daughter on from Casa Davka, and they talked a lot about how they had to go through some relationship counseling in order to jump into business together. And I think about the dynamic between my father and myself and how growing up God, there wasn't a bigger idiot on earth than my father. And as I grew up, and I
Right.
was like, oh, this guy actually knows some stuff. And like, we probably would never go into business together, but he was a business broker for a bunch of years and did a lot of sales and things like that. And like, so, being in the position you are where you get to work with a guy that growing up, I don't know what it was like, but now you guys have to have some respect for each other and treat each other, as peers and, things like that. It's got to be just such a mind blowing dynamic.
It is. I mean, it's, yeah, it is.
Yeah. Awesome. So you head up the M&A part. Does David touch that part as well, or is that just all on you?
It's all on me, but we support each other kind of behind the scenes,
Mm-hmm.
both on M&A and then I on his advisory side. And so, I'll often ask for his perspective on the way a situation is playing out or, the terms being offered to a client, just because he does have some deep expertise there.
Yeah.
And then I'll take that, we'll talk through things, come up with a path forward and run with it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like what is looked for in an agency, like the DNA of an agency that's right for acquisition?
So it depends a lot on the type of buyer. But if you're talking about things that have broad appeal to multiple types of buyers, which would, in theory, make it an easier agency to sell, consistent profitability, obviously, a low client concentration. So you don't have a single client that's over 25%, just to reduce some of the risk moving forward if you were to lose a big client.
Mm-hmm.
This is an industry that's really so much about the people. And so the specific makeup of the team and the expertise of the team can matter a lot. If you've got, senior level creative team, there are agencies specifically looking to acquire senior level creative agencies because that's something that they lack. Your positioning is also really important because if you think about the majority of buyers, at least for firms this size, kind of between 2 and 20 million is where I'm talking in revenues. The majority of buyers are other marketing firms or marketing adjacent firms, and they will be acquiring because it's something they do not have, right? So they don't want kind of a broad-based, integrated marketing firm. They want a firm that's very specialized in a specific either industry or, horizontal niche, something that's going to be additive to their firm so that they can either cross-sell clients or sell new services to their existing clients, give them chops when they're pitching new work, that type of thing.
Yeah, and to me, that last part is clutch. Certainly revenue, profitability, recurring revenue, but how do I break into a new vertical? How do I, add to my current positioning by bringing something else on that's going to complement it? Is there like a formula? Sure, there's a formula. What are your thoughts on like recurring revenue versus project-based work and the attraction of the two there?
I mean, if you have to choose, you choose recurring, right? But there's a lot of types of firms for which that just doesn't work. If you've got a brand identity house, there's almost no chance of getting any recurring revenue. It's just big project after big project. And so there's no expectation that a brand identity house is going to be able to have recurring revenue. But the extent to which you can at least productize your service offerings to make the sales cycle shorter or easier, you can kind of approximate some of that. And then when you get into the more kind of, digital SEM type stuff, like you can certainly start thinking more about recurring revenue and the closer you can get to recurring revenue, the closer basically you can get to a SaaS model, the higher your multiple will be. But because it is such a project-based industry, there's no expectation that you're going to get to 100% recurring revenue.
Yeah. So that systemization of how they get work done or how they bring in leads and close them and then do the work, that's clutch. Is that the same or different than like having their own IP?
IP is interesting. A lot of firms that we talk to think that they have very valuable IP.
Yeah.
And then you look at their books and they haven't been profitable for 2 years. And IP is really only valuable to the extent that it drives profit. And so in most cases, IP will show up in profit more than it will in this kind of standalone thing. Now, you might have developed a marketing tool that, could conceivably be spun out as its own product or something. And in that case, yes, that can be very valuable. But for the most part, it's really about your processes and particularly your new business processes. Yes, you want to have internal processes, but you want a new business process that is not 100% reliant on the founder, because the founder will eventually go away.
Yeah. I would imagine, to add to that, that certainly the new biz can't rely on the founder, but overall ops, like that founder needs to have extracted themselves from the day-to-day for quite some time prior to acquisition. Yeah.
Yes. Ideally, which is why it's harder to sell, a 10-person firm, because it's hard for a founder to extract themselves from day to day at that size.
Yeah. What about valuation? I know I talk to a lot of shops that are like, yeah, we'd love to, enter into the idea of, being acquired, but going through valuation, I know we're not going to show, profit this year or things like that. And it just seems like an overwhelming, daunting task. Like what's your guys' key for that process?
Valuation is something that I think is worth doing annually, almost as part of just a business planning process. And even if you're going to come back with a low number, it's at least a starting point, and now you can measure yourself against that starting point. There are certainly qualitative factors that go into evaluation. So it's not only about the numbers, it's about the quality of the clients, the makeup of the clients, your positioning, recurring revenue, your geography. There's all these intangibles that also get wrapped up into that number. So we work with a bunch of firms where we'll do evaluation for them annually, and if nothing else, it's a reason to look at, something true and have a conversation about, are we headed the right direction or not? What do where do you need to get? And then how do we help get you there? I think putting your head in the sand basically and saying, well, I know my evaluation is not gonna be high enough, I don't need to do it, is not a great way to run your business. You want as much information as you can before you start making decisions, and valuation is just one additional piece of information, particularly if you are eventually building towards a sale.
So even, if it's 3 to 5 years out from when I'm planning on exiting, start doing it as a benchmark, or 10 years out, start using it as a benchmark for the next year of, all right, I was at X, but I'd love to get to whatever in the next 5 years, using it for benchmark on regularity.
Yeah. And because of that, we actually developed this sellability index, basically, which is like this number between 0 and 100. And so you can, over time, track if you're getting closer or farther away from becoming a sellable firm. Because, some of your numbers are going to go up, some are going to go down. Sometimes it can be hard to put all that together and say, am I headed in the right direction? So yes, I think using it as a benchmarking tool can be very helpful.
Are you able to talk about some of the components that go into your sellability index as far as what you look at and score?
Yeah, sure. We include your margins, so your EBITDA margins, your positioning, your EBITDA as just a hard number from the last year. Because the closer you can get that to $1 million or above, the easier it is, the more potential buyers you have, basically, to sell to. We look at the variability of your growth rate. Is your growth stable or not?
Mm-hmm.
We look at recurring revenue, and we look at your client concentration and basically the risk that your client roster would pose to a potential buyer.
Okay, so only a handful, six or so, half a dozen things that really help define sellability of an agency, and is it worth it to put it on the market? Would you get more for it if you waited a year and continue those trends more, in an upward trajectory, that kind of thing?
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. What's the time commitment like? If an agency is like, all right, fine, we'll go through valuation again. So it's so daunting. Let's demyth
It
that.
shouldn't. Yeah, it shouldn't be. I mean, it's we require. It's usually about 2 hours of data gathering, with a set of reports, and then we'll send qualitative surveys out to the owners, and from there we'll go back and forth over email a little bit. But we have all the information we need, and so it really just comes down to it's 2 to 3 weeks of number crunching, and then we'll get on the phone and walk you through it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to know, again, like you said, what people are dealing with, what they've got, in their pockets. So I love that. Some of the things that you mentioned are somewhat subjective. Certainly, EBITDA, profitability, that's a numbers game. But positioning, things like that, like how do you, I guess, score something that's so subjective to, do I have a strong foothold in the food and beverage industry?
Yeah, you're right, and I think it's because we are active brokers in the space. That's the only reason why we are able to pinpoint, some of this
Yeah.
stuff. And our valuations are usually on target with what offers come in within 10% or so, but half of what we do is positioning work, and so
Hmm.
we have a strong perspective on positioning, and just being able to think through some of the past deals we've worked on, right, and how these various factors played out, that all gets wrapped up into each valuation we do.
Love that. Yeah, it's a compliment of services that you're doing. What are you seeing, trends in M&A this year versus last year, as far as growth through acquisition, or owners looking for, exit? What kind of trends are you seeing?
Last year was tough. A lot of firms that we worked with had soft Q1s or Q2s, which kind of knocked them out of the market for the remainder of the year. And then you had interest rates go up, which knocked a lot of buyers out of the market.
Hmm.
We started seeing things come back in the winter, like around November, December of 2023. And there's been steady interest. I'll say right now, it's the first time I've seen where you have more interested buyers than you do interested sellers. So there's tons of buyers out there, and we get inundated with folks asking for, hey, what's your deal flow look like? Do you have any agencies I could buy?
Hmm.
And there just aren't as many firms on the market right now. Now, multiples are still kind of depressed from the heyday of 2021, but they're not unreasonably low. I think you've got firms that have had softer years, and so they're trying to wait it out. Or you've got firms that are still trying to recover from COVID,
Hmm.
and even if it's just culturally, right, like
Yeah.
having to reinvent their agency effectively, and so that has just knocked some folks out of the running. But we are certainly starting to see things pick up, and I think I think later this year we'll see pretty significant uptick once 2024 numbers kind of come in, or can at least be annualized to some degree.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping for that as well. I do hear murmurs from some owners, but nothing super exciting of, yeah, this is what I'd like to get done this year. Because like you said, it's been a slow start to the year. So it'd be nice to see those numbers, uptick a lot. The succession planning work that you guys do, kind of how do you define that separate from just putting an agency up on the block?
Yeah, that's really individualized depending on the goals of the usually founders, principals, and the type of agency they're running. So factors that come into play are age, gas left in the tank, long-term goals, and if they're needing this for financial purposes, or if they have already solved for their retirement in other ways. The staff that they have now, and if there is someone kind of capable of stepping in and running things, because that's just a tough thing. Like if you don't have it, it's hard to go out and look and find it. So
Yeah.
That will certainly impact recommendations as well.
Yeah, having that number two at, again, at that $2 to $20 million size that you're talking about is just so vital. And I just can't understand how many owners hold on to being number one and number two, running everything soup to nuts, and not like putting that second in command in place and allowing them to really take hold of a lot of things. Just even if you're not looking to sell, that's just a really smart thing to do. But once you're,
you're capping your growth if you don't, right? Because there's only so much you can accomplish. And you might be a control enthusiast or control freak, as some would say. But as an entrepreneur, you do have to give up a lot of that control if you want to reach, different levels of scale.
I think that's one of the key factors of the differentiator between being a business owner and being an actual entrepreneur. And that's some of the smart decisions that as an owner you make of, I'm going to put number two in place first. And I love the politically correct definition of a control enthusiast, and not that they can't overlap and there's some sort of, coexistence there, but yeah, I think that's a super smart decision that needs to be made to get out of the way. So yeah, two bearded, balding guys agreeing on some ownership stuff there. I dig it.
With
shift
poor
gears real
eyesight too.
Yeah, with great glasses. Shifting gears real quick, couple of random rapid fire questions for you. The answers to these can be, personal or business, and can be, in whatever realm you want them to be. But the first is, what's a tool that you recently integrated into your life that you look back and you're like, how did I live without this thing in my life?
I love using Spark, which is an email app that I find much more intuitive than Apple's default and any others that I've used. And it has allowed me to get more control over my inbox. And for me personally, my inbox has a direct correlation to my mental health, which is, I know, horrible, and I need to go to counseling. But Spark has helped me make some small strides there.
Nice plug for Spark. I dig that. I also think in both directions. One is the desire to get to inbox zero causes anxiety, but the other side is leaving things as to-dos in my inbox also causes anxiety, because then it's, glaring at me. So I get that. What's something other than this podcast and other than Two Bobs that you can't get enough of? You're binging the heck out of a show, a podcast, a book, a thing like that.
The Economics of Everyday Things, which is a podcast on, you'd have to Google it, but it's relatively new, and they're short 20, 25-minute episodes on like the most random stuff, like the economics of cadavers, the economics of just stuff that, hula hoops, like whatever.
Wow.
And there's just interesting tidbits that you can pull out. I'm an econ geek.
I'll have to check that out. It sounds interesting. we're big nerds on stuff you should know, which sounds like it's got a similar overlap.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Yeah, very cool. And then finally, what is a super invaluable piece of business advice that you can share with the listeners?
If you have started a business, always come back to the fact that you started it for you. Do not let the business run you. There are ways to get out, rethink. And, particularly in America, I think we have this like built-in drive for growth and better. And growth is not always the right answer for certain people, right? Like growth can make you miserable if that isn't something that fulfills you. And that's okay. So just come back to your reasons for the business and build something that suits you.
I love that. Keeping it personal, keeping it tied to, personal goals, family goals, things like that, and not pressures of other people's goals and expectations of what quote unquote should happen. So love it. Jonathan, thank you. I appreciate you and your expertise and your wisdom shared here today. Thank you. Thanks
for having me. Oh,
yeah, my pleasure.
If you want to learn more, you can go to our website, punctuation.com as well.
Awesome. And that'll be in the notes on the website. So we'll link to it. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.